Hey guys, it's Silver, and I'm here today to talk about the common question, how do I bring up the possibility of having DID or OSDD to my therapist? A lot of people think that with DID or OSDD, the therapist is actually the first person to point it out to a client, but there's actually a large portion of systems who figured it out themselves or think it might be a possibility and have to bring it up to a therapist who might not have seen that in them. And we're actually part of this group. We brought up the possibility of having OSDD and the fact that we do, both when we were first getting diagnosed and for future therapists as we've moved across the country. We've had to deal with this about 4 or 5 times, so we thought we might make a video to help you guys get over the fear of talking to your therapist about the possibility of DID or OSDD. To start off with, there's multiple different ways or formats you can tell your therapist you're questioning DID or OSDD. The first one is quite simple. You just tell them in person in a therapy session. But for many systems, that's just not applicable, simply due to anxiety or other factors. So I'm here to tell you that it's totally okay to send an email, write them a letter, text them even. Therapists, especially those who work with traumatized patients, are totally on board with the fact that bringing up new things in therapy sessions can be super anxiety inducing. And if you ever run into a therapist who's like, no, you can't email me something, no, you can't text me something, you have to tell me to my face, that's a sign of a red flag, and do not keep seeing this therapist. Your therapist should be open to you about you communicating with them in forms other than just talking to them face to face. Our therapist currently lets us email her, text her, talk to her face to face, or even close our eyes and her eyes so we feel more comfortable speaking in a therapy session. All of these ways are valid, and it really comes down to which way makes you guys feel most comfortable bringing up to your therapist the possibility of having DID or OSDD. It's a big subject, and it's a-okay to be anxious. I know we for sure were. For example, back in the day when we first told our very first therapist that we were questioning OSDD, we actually made a whole 30-slide PowerPoint presentation detailing our symptoms, the myths and misconceptions, little alter profiles for each alter that I had interacted with up to that point, and we just sat her down in a therapy session and had her click through the PowerPoint because we were so scared that when we got to the therapy session, we would forget everything that we had thought of, leading to this moment of me sitting in therapy going, I don't remember any of my symptoms or why I'm questioning this anymore because I am anxious and every thought has left my mind. So don't be afraid to be creative in your communication methods. If your therapist does not support you, they are not a good therapist. Our next thing to consider when talking to a therapist about questioning is phrasing. One of the safest methods of talking to your therapist about questioning DID or OSDD is bringing up your symptoms first, saying, this is what I've been experiencing dissociation, there's portions where it feels like someone else is controlling my body, or I'm missing my memories, or I'm having these thoughts that I cannot control and are really surprising internally, and I don't know what to do with them. I've been reading up a little bit about dissociative disorders, and I think that feels similar. What do you think? I said this was the safest way as a nod to those who might be experiencing anxiety surrounding possibly being invalidated. And for those with anxiety, especially for us, I know that's what felt like the safest way. But it really shouldn't be any safer than just saying outright to your therapist, I think I have OSDD, or I think I have DID. Here's why. And the fear surrounding why systems can't say that is because we're worried a therapist will outright say, there's no way you can have DID. DID and OSDD don't exist. You're not the kind of person who has DID or OSDD. You can't possibly have DID because you brought it up yourself. People with DID or OSDD never do research about it beforehand. And while this is a valid fear, if any therapist says this to you, you just leave their session immediately. You're allowed to just walk out the door, because saying any of these things within seconds of you bringing up the idea is a huge red flag from the therapist. I believe it takes at least the bare minimum 10 hours of therapy sessions before they can really get a handle on who you guys are and whether or not you could possibly have DID or OSDD. And that comes from a personal experience, because I know whenever we get a new therapist, it takes 5 or 6 sessions for our system to start feeling comfortable with the therapist. And then it takes another few more sessions to like fully delve into all of our symptomology. And if you're going to a new therapist and saying, hey, I think I have DID or OSDD, or you're going to a session with the therapist you're currently going to and bringing the symptoms up for the first time, never having talked about the symptoms before, it takes multiple sessions for a therapist to get a handle on what your symptoms are and who you are as a person in conjunction with those symptoms. And even then, after that 10 sessions, those 20 sessions, the however many sessions it takes for the therapist to get to know you and your symptoms, if they don't think that you have DID or OSDD, they should say something along the lines of, hey, I'm worried about jumping to conclusions. I don't think I know your symptoms well enough, and I think we should look into them a little bit more. They might fit X disorder better than DID or OSDD. Let's run a couple more diagnostic tests together and have a conversation about this. Good therapists never try to force a diagnostic label or the absence of a diagnostic label on their clients. A therapist will never know you better than you know yourself. And if they think they know you so well they can override all of your observations about yourself within one hour session, that is a huge red flag and they are not a good therapist. There are 3 big red flags that I identify when bringing up DID or OSDD to a therapist that says you should not trust their opinion about you. And this is in the case of if a therapist says you don't have DID. The first red flag is if they don't let you express your thoughts otherwise or you feel unsafe doing so. Even if you feel unsafe expressing your thoughts otherwise to a therapist, that's a big red flag. Trust your gut. If you're having severe dissociation symptoms, it's a high likelihood that you're a trauma survivor, which means you have a very good gut for these sort of things. If you feel unsafe at all in a situation with a therapist, it's good to just see another one. The second red flag is if a therapist says you don't have DID or OSDD and they don't spend a lot of time with you getting to know you and your symptoms. If they say this within 1 session, within 2 sessions, I don't think that's a good indicator of whether or not you have DID or OSDD. A therapist can't get to know you well enough within 2 hours to tell you 100% whether you have a diagnostic label or not. And the third red flag, which I think is the most important, is if the therapist doesn't talk to you about why they think you don't have DID or OSDD, or why they think another label fits better. Therapists, as a baseline rule, should be open and transparent about their decision-making process. A therapist should be open and honest with you about why a diagnostic label might fit you or might not. This should be an ongoing conversation, not a therapist telling you outright what they think and expecting you to take their opinion as fact. Because honestly, that's what it is, an opinion. A therapist is a professional opinion on your lived experience. Different therapists will have different professional opinions and might even have different diagnostic criteria. At the end of the day, you should search for a therapist that you feel comfortable with, you feel safe with, and you feel you can have an ongoing, honest conversation with. And with that huge rant out of the way, that's why I think it should be just as safe for you to just outright say, I think I have DID, I think I have OSDD, because a therapist should never shoot you down just for saying that. And if anyone out there has an experience of being shot down for saying that, I'm so sorry, and you should never have gone through that experience. I've been there myself. We've gone to a therapist who's told us DID and OSDD doesn't exist. We've had a therapist tell us that alters are just silos in your brain and that they're imaginary fictional constructs. So I get it. I know the anxiety. I've been told that to my face. And it sucks. But the power is ultimately in your hands. As one of my peers in mental health activism said, you are hiring the therapist. If they are not doing a good job, you fire them. And it's true, you are paying the therapist to help you. If they aren't doing a good job, or if they're putting you down, or if they're invalidating you, or they're shooting you down without even having a conversation, you have full right to end your treatment with them. You have full right to just walk out of the room right then. And 4 to 5 therapists in, we walk into the first therapy session with a new therapist saying, hello, we've been diagnosed with OSDD 1B. Here's a little bit about us as a system. And I think we do that not only because we're more confident now, but because we've gone through those bad experiences, and if we're going to interact with another therapist who's going to straight out invalidate us, we want to get that off the table as soon as possible. And I know that method doesn't work for everyone, and I know not everyone's comfortable with that, but that's something we've found, that just laying ourselves out, and if the therapist invalidates us right then, we can just walk right back out the door and not have to deal with them anymore. But at the end of the day, what works for you is what works for you, and we are here to support you in whatever way you find works to communicate with your therapist. Find the therapist that works for you. Find the way of communication that works for you. Find the way to talk to the therapist about DID and OSDD in the way that works for your system. You guys deserve the whole world. And I know it's scary to talk to a therapist about having alters and having a system and being a part of a whole, but I believe in you, and if you need any help, you can always reach out to us. Your community is here for you. And I and the rest of my system hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.